Husband orders her to kneel and apologize to her lover, then goes totally crazy after she leaves. Imagine being forced by your own husband to kneel before another man and apologize for betraying him. Sounds unbelievable, right? But what happens next takes a shocking twist, because when she finally walks out, her husband completely loses control in a way no one saw coming. Before we go into details, click subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from. I would be glad to know this story goes as far as Canada, all of the United States of America, Australia, Africa, and even the United Kingdom. So let me know where you're watching from on comments section. I pray may the good God Almighty bless and preserve you all and your family. Amen. Let's begin. The morning sun poured through the lace curtains, painting golden streaks across the living room floor. From the outside, their home looked like a quiet sanctuary, a place where love had rooted itself deeply and happiness blossomed in every corner. Neighbors often whispered about how perfect Daniel and Elena seemed together. The hardworking husband, the graceful wife, the laughter that echoed during summer barbecues. To anyone looking in, they were the very image of harmony. Daniel sat at the oak dining table, sipping his black coffee, already dressed in his crisp suit. His face was calm, controlled, almost too precise, like a man who had built his life on discipline. He glanced at his watch every few minutes, always calculating, always moving ahead to the next task. Elena floated around the kitchen, humming softly as she plated his breakfast. Her beauty was quiet, effortless. Her smile could light up the entire room. But as she placed the plate in front of him, that smile flickered, just for a second, as though a shadow had passed behind her eyes. "Thank you," Daniel said, his tone polite but distant. No warmth, no pause to really see her, just a courtesy. He picked up his fork, already thinking about the meeting waiting for him downtown. Elena sat opposite him, her hands resting on her lap. She studied him, his neatly pressed suit, his sharp jawline, his unshakable composure. Once, she had adored that steadiness. It had made her feel safe. But now, as silence stretched between them, she felt an emptiness growing inside her chest. She longed for conversation, for laughter, for something deeper than the mechanical, "How was your day?" that had become their routine. The clock ticked loudly in the quiet room. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Each second reminded her of what was missing. Finally, Daniel looked up. "I'll be late tonight," he said matter-of-factly. "There's a business dinner." Elena nodded, swallowing the words she wanted to say. Another night alone. Another evening of silence echoing through this house. She forced a smile. "Of course, I'll leave something in the oven for you." He didn't notice the disappointment hiding behind her eyes. He stood, kissed her forehead quickly, a gesture that felt more habitual than loving, and left with his briefcase. The door clicked shut, and just like that, the house was quiet again. Elena sank into his empty chair, staring at the half-eaten breakfast he had left behind. She picked at her wedding ring, twisting it around her finger, and a lump formed in her throat. To the world, she was the lucky wife of a successful man. But behind these walls, she felt invisible. In that silence, her phone buzzed on the counter. A single message lit up the screen. Her lips curved, almost against her will, as her heart gave a small, forbidden flutter. For the first time that morning, she felt seen. The hours of the day stretched long and lonely. Elena wandered through the rooms of the house, each one meticulously arranged, spotless, and cold. She had decorated every corner with love once. Family photos, soft throw blankets, fresh flowers on the mantel. But now those same touches mocked her. They whispered of a life she thought she'd built with Daniel, a life that seemed to be fading further with every passing day. By late afternoon, she found herself curled on the couch with a book in her hands. The words blurred. She wasn't reading. She was waiting, waiting for the sound of the garage door, waiting for footsteps, waiting for Daniel to come home and maybe, just maybe, notice her. When he finally arrived, the sky outside had already turned violet with dusk. Elena rushed to the door with a hopeful smile, the way she used to when they were first married. But Daniel walked past her with a curt nod, loosening his tie, his eyes glued to the glowing screen of his phone. His face lit up only when he saw the email he'd been waiting for. "I reheated dinner," Elena said softly, almost nervously. "Your plate's in the oven." "Mmm," he replied absently, not lifting his eyes. He set his briefcase down, opened his laptop on the kitchen counter, and began typing furiously. As though she hadn't spoken at all, her shoulders sank. She stood there for a moment, watching him, her husband, her partner, the man who had once held her like she was his whole world. Now he looked like a stranger who simply lived in the same house. She sat across from him, resting her chin on her hand. "How was your day?" she asked. It was a question she'd asked countless times, but the answer had become a script. "Busy," he muttered, not looking up. "And was it good busy? Or frustrating busy?" She tried again, her voice light that he sighed, finally glancing up, irritation flickering in his eyes. "Elena, I don't really want to rehash the whole day. Okay? Can I just finish this?" Her throat tightened. "Of course," she whispered, turning away. The silence that followed was unbearable. The only sounds were the soft clatter of his keyboard and the low hum of the refrigerator. Elena stared at the man in front of her, and for the first time, she realized she felt lonelier sitting across from him than she did when he wasn't home at all. Later that night, Daniel slid into bed beside her, his mind still racing with numbers, deadlines, and strategies. He didn't notice the way she lay rigid, her eyes open in the dark, staring at the ceiling. She wanted to roll toward him, to rest her head on his chest, to feel that heartbeat that used to ground her. But she stayed still, afraid of rejection. Eye in the darkness. She whispered softly to herself, "Do you even see me anymore?" He never answered. He was already asleep. The next morning, Elena sat by the window with a lukewarm cup of tea in her hands. The world outside was alive. Neighbors greeting one another, children rushing to school, the postman delivering letters. Life pulsed all around her. Yet inside, she felt as though she were living behind glass. Unseen and untouched, her phone buzzed. A familiar name appeared on the screen. Adrian. Her heart skipped. It had been years since they had spoken regularly. They had once been close, old college friends who had shared late-night study sessions and dreams of the future. Time and life had carried them apart, but recently, by chance, he had resurfaced. A casual message on social media, a quick catch-up, a memory rekindled. Now, there it was again, "Adrian. Saw something today that reminded me of you. Hope you're doing okay." Elena's lips curved into a smile she hadn't worn in weeks. She hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, before finally typing back, "Elena, I'm doing fine. What was it?" A few seconds later, the reply came, "Adrian, a little cafe near the park. You used to love places like that. Remember when we skipped that seminar and sat in one for hours?" The memory rushed back, warm and vivid. The sound of their laughter, the way time had melted away as they talked about everything and nothing. She could almost taste the sweet coffee and feel the freedom of being young, unburdened. For the first time in a long time, Elena laughed out loud. That afternoon, she found herself meeting Adrian at that very cafe. She told herself it was harmless, two old friends catching up. And when she saw him walk in, his familiar smile disarming her, it did feel harmless. He looked older, more seasoned, but his eyes held the same gentle warmth she remembered. Unlike Daniel's sharp, calculating stare, Adrian's gaze lingered, soft and attentive, as though every word she spoke mattered. They ordered coffee. The conversation flowed easily, like water finding its path. Adrian asked about her life, her passions, her days. He listened, truly listened, not with half an ear, not distracted, but with a focus that made her feel seen, valued, alive. At a T1 point, she admitted, almost shyly, "I don't laugh much these days." Adrian tilted his head, his expression tender. "Then that's a tragedy, because your laugh used to light up an entire room." Heat rushed to her cheeks. She lowered her eyes, tracing the rim of her cup with her finger. No one had said something like that to her in years. As they parted ways, Adrian's hand brushed hers. Light, fleeting, almost accidental. But the warmth of that touch lingered all the way home. When Elena stepped through the door of her house, Daniel was once again glued to his laptop, his brow furrowed, his mind elsewhere. He barely looked up. "Hi," she said softly. He grunted, not even glancing at her. She stood there for a moment, staring at him, her heart aching, and then, quietly, she slipped into the other room. Inside her chest, two truths battled: guilt and the dangerous comfort of feeling alive again. At first, Daniel didn't notice anything. His world was numbers, deadlines, and endless meetings. But over the next few weeks, small things began to gnaw at him. Little details that didn't quite fit. One evening, he arrived home earlier than usual. The house smelled faintly of perfume, the kind Elena wore when they first dated. She hadn't worn it in years. He smiled at first, a flicker of nostalgia warming him, but when he entered the living room, she jumped slightly, startled, as though she hadn't expected him back so soon. "You're early?" she said quickly. Tucking her phone beneath a cushion, Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Meeting ended sooner than I thought." She gave a tight smile, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her dress. He let it go, but something in the way her eyes darted away lodged itself in his mind. A few days later, he noticed she was humming again. Elena used to hum when she cooked, when she cleaned, when she was happy. He hadn't heard that soft tune in years. Now it was back, flowing from her lips as she moved about the kitchen. "Good mood?" he asked, watching her closely. Her cheeks flushed. "Just felt like it." He studied her, the lightness in her step, the sudden bursts of laughter at her phone, the way she disappeared into another room when a message came through. He wanted to believe it was nothing, just his wife finding joy again. But deep down, unease clawed at him. One night, lying in bed beside her, Daniel turned slightly, pretending to be asleep. He heard the faint buzz of her phone. A soft glow lit her face as she smiled down at the screen, her fingers flying across the keys. "Who are you smiling at like that?" he thought, his jaw tightening. "Why don't you ever smile at me that way anymore?" He rolled over abruptly, and she quickly shoved the phone aside, her body stiff. "Can't sleep?" she asked nervously. "No," he said flatly, staring at the ceiling. The silence between them stretched, heavier than ever. The next day at work, Daniel found himself distracted, his mind replaying every detail. Elena's flushed cheeks, her secretive phone calls, the perfume, the laughter. He shook his head, muttering to himself, "Don't be paranoid." But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't push the thought away. For the first time, Daniel, who prided himself on control, felt something he despised: doubt. And once suspicion takes root, it doesn't let go. Daniel's suspicion had been gnawing at him for weeks, a restless itch that refused to quiet. He told himself he trusted Elena, that she was his wife, his partner, the woman who had stood beside him through everything. But the pieces no longer fit together, and his mind, sharp, methodical, unforgiving, wouldn't stop assembling the puzzle. One evening, he came home earlier than planned. He slipped through the door quietly, setting his keys down without a sound. From the hallway, he heard her voice, soft, low, threaded with a laugh he hadn't heard in years. He froze, peering into the living room. He saw Elena, curled on the couch, phone pressed to her ear. She was smiling, her eyes glowing in a way that stabbed at him. "Yes," she whispered, laughter spilling out. "I can't believe you remembered that." Her tone was light, playful, tender. Not the voice she used with him. Daniel's chest tightened, his jaw locked. He stepped forward, making his presence known. Elena jumped, fumbling with the phone, pressing the call to an end too quickly. "Who was that?" Daniel asked, his voice calm but edged with steel. She forced a smile. "Just an old friend. From college." "An old friend?" he repeated slowly, eyes narrowing. "Yes." Her hands twisted in her lap, betraying her nerves. "It's nothing." But Daniel knew better. He carried that moment with him like a splinter under the skin. The next day, when Elena left for errands, he sat at her desk. Her laptop was open, her phone left charging. He hesitated. He hated the idea of prying, but his hands moved almost on their own, driven by a force he couldn't contain. The first message he saw made his blood run cold. "Adrian. Can't stop thinking about yesterday." You're the only thing that makes sense to me right now. Another followed. Elena, I feel alive when I'm with you. I don't remember the last time I felt this way. Daniel's hands shook as he scrolled, each word carving into him like a knife. The playful jokes, the shared memories, the longing, the plans to meet again. He slammed the laptop shut, his chest heaving. His mind screamed denial, but the truth was undeniable, printed in digital ink. His wife, the woman he trusted, the woman he built his life with, was giving her heart to another man. That night, Daniel sat in the darkened living room, waiting for her. The clock ticked. Midnight came. Then 1 o'clock. Finally, the door opened, and Elena slipped inside, her cheeks flushed, her hair slightly tousled, her smile still lingering from wherever she had been. When she saw him sitting there, her breath caught. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice faltering. His eyes were shadowed, his face unreadable. "Where were you?" I told you. I went to dinner with a friend." He cut her off, his voice low, trembling with restrained fury. "Don't lie to me. I've seen the messages." Her face drained of color. Silence filled the room like poison. Daniel leaned forward, his hands gripping the armrests, his voice breaking as he asked the question that seared through his soul. "Why, Elena? Why him? Why not me?" The house was eerily quiet. Shadows stretched across the walls as the clock ticked past midnight. Daniel sat motionless in the armchair, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles turned white. His heart thundered in his chest, yet his face was a mask, cold, unreadable, terrifying in its stillness. Elena stood near the doorway, her purse dangling loosely in her hand. She knew the silence was worse than shouting. She knew what was coming. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, let me explain." "Explain?" His voice cracked like a whip. "What exactly do you think you need to explain? That you've been sneaking around behind my back? That you've been laughing with another man the way you haven't laughed with me in years?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you." "But you did." His tone was flat, dangerous. "You destroyed me, Elena." He stood, his towering frame closing the space between them. She shrank back, pressing against the wall, her heart pounding. His eyes, once calm, once controlled, now burned with a fire she had never seen before. "Who is he?" Daniel demanded. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "Say his name!" he roared, his voice shaking the walls. "Adrian?" she whispered, barely audible. The name tore through him like glass. He staggered back for a moment, as though struck, then clenched his fists. "You humiliated me," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You let another man have the pieces of you that were mine. And now you're going to make it right." Elena's throat tightened. "Daniel, please." "Kneel," he ordered, his eyes narrowing. She froze. "What?" "Kneel," he repeated, his voice thunderous. "You will kneel and you will apologize to him. Right now. Call him. Put him on the phone. Tell him what you've done. Tell him you are sorry for dragging him into this." Her whole body trembled. "Daniel, this is cruel. Cruel." His laugh was hollow, bitter. "No, Elena. What you did to me was cruel. What you did to us was cruel. You will kneel." Tears spilled down her cheeks. Her pride fought against his command, but her guilt, her shame, her fear, it crushed her. Slowly, with trembling knees, she sank to the floor. Daniel's chest heaved as he thrust the phone into her hands. "Call him." Her hands shook as she dialed Adrian's number. When his voice answered, warm and gentle, the sob burst from her lips. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the receiver, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." Daniel watched, his eyes blazing, as if her humiliation was the only thing holding his shattered world together. But even as she spoke the words, a part of him realized. No apology could ever glue back the pieces of what she had broken. When she ended the call, she looked up at him through tears, broken, devastated. But Daniel's face wasn't satisfied. It was darker now, twisted by something far beyond betrayal. "Get out," he said coldly. "Leave." Elena's breath caught. "Daniel, leave," he roared, his voice shaking the house. And for the first time in their marriage, Elena turned her back on him, her sobs echoing through the empty hall as she walked out into the night. Daniel stood there, his chest heaving, the silence pressing in. He had forced her to kneel. He had broken her pride. But as the door slammed behind her, the victory felt hollow, because she was gone. And with her, the last shred of the man he once was. The night air was bitter, stinging Elena's cheeks as she stumbled down the street. Her tears blurred the glowing streetlights into hazy halos. Each step felt heavier than the last, her knees still aching from where she had knelt on the cold hardwood floor of their living room. She wrapped her coat tightly around herself, shivering not from the cold, but from the memory. Daniel's voice, harsh, furious, echoed in her ears. Kneel. Call him. Apologize. Her body trembled as if the command still lingered in her bones. She wandered aimlessly for what felt like hours before collapsing onto a park bench. Her breath came in ragged sobs, her chest tight, her hands clutching at her coat as though she could hold herself together. For years, she had carried guilt quietly, tucked behind soft smiles and excuses. But tonight, it spilled out of her like poison. She hated herself for betraying Daniel, for betraying her vows, for letting loneliness lead her into Adrian's arms. Yet beneath the guilt burned another wound, one she couldn't ignore. Daniel's rage, the way he had stripped her of dignity, forcing her to kneel, to humiliate herself further. She had hurt him, yes, but in that moment, she had felt not like a wife, not like a woman, but like a prisoner at his mercy. The shame was unbearable. Her phone buzzed. Adrian's name lit up the screen. Elena? His voice cracked with worry when she answered. What happened? You sounded broken earlier. Talk to me. Her throat tightened. He knows Adrian. Daniel knows everything. There was a pause. Did he hurt you? No, she whispered. Not physically. But he made me call you. He made me apologize. On my knees. Silence on the line. Then Adrian's voice, low and furious. That's not love. That's cruelty. Elena pressed a hand to her face, tears flowing again. But what I did, was it love either? I betrayed him, Adrian. I destroyed our marriage. No, Adrian said firmly. Daniel destroyed it long before I came back into your life. His neglect, his silence, his walls. You were starving for affection. Elena, you don't need to carry all the blame. But her heart didn't believe him. The guilt was too heavy. By the time dawn broke, Elena hadn't slept. She sat curled on Adrian's couch, wrapped in a blanket he had given her when she showed up at his door hours earlier. Her eyes were swollen, her voice hoarse, her body trembling from exhaustion. Adrian sat across from her, watching with quiet concern, but keeping his distance. He knew she needed space, not more confusion. Rest, he said softly, but rest wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's face. His fury, his heartbreak, his demand. And beneath it all, one truth tore at her soul. She couldn't go back. The home she had built with Daniel no longer existed. The woman she had been was gone. And now, all that remained was the shattered shell of a wife who had lost everything. Her dignity, her marriage, and the version of herself she once believed in. Adrian paced his small apartment, his hands running through his hair, his chest tight with unease. Elena sat on the couch, curled into the blanket he had given her, her eyes hollow from sleeplessness. He wanted to hold her, to comfort her, to erase every tear Daniel had caused. But he didn't move, because beneath his love, guilt gnawed at him. This is my fault, he thought. I should have stayed away. I should never have let this go this far. That he leaned against the wall, his eyes fixed on her fragile form. Elena? He began softly. She looked up, her face pale, her eyes swollen. What? He hesitated. The words weighed heavy on his tongue. I need to ask you something. If it hadn't been me, if I hadn't been the one to show up in your life again, would you still have? Her lips trembled. I don't know. I was so lonely, Adrian. I was drowning. You just happened to be there when I couldn't breathe anymore. His chest ached. He wanted to believe her words meant he was special, chosen. But part of him feared he was just a symptom of her emptiness, not the cure. Later, when she finally drifted into a restless sleep on the couch, Adrian sat by the window, staring out into the gray dawn. He thought of Daniel, The man who once had everything Adrian had secretly dreamed of. The husband, the house, the life. And now, Adrian had stolen the one piece Daniel had left. Elena's heart. The guilt pressed down on him like a weight. Am I any better than him? He wondered. I tell myself I love her, but did I only take advantage of her pain? The next day, Elena stirred awake, her voice barely a whisper. I can't go back there. Not after what he did. Not after what I did. Adrian sat beside her, searching her face. Then what do you want, Elena? Me? Freedom? Or just an escape from him? Her eyes filled with tears. I don't know. I don't even know who I am anymore. Adrian's heart broke. He wanted to say, choose me. Stay with me. Let me love you the way he never did. But the words stuck in his throat. Because deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. She didn't need another man to define her. She needed to stand on her own. And so, with a heavy heart, Adrian whispered, then maybe the best thing I can do for you is let you go. Elena's head snapped toward him, panic flashing in her eyes. Adrian. He shook his head gently, though his own eyes burned. You deserve healing, Elena. Not another prison. Not another man to carry the weight of your brokenness. His words sliced through both of them, because in his attempt to free her, he was also tearing himself apart. That night, as Elena cried herself to sleep once more, Adrian sat awake. His heart in ruins that he loved her. But love, he realized, wasn't always about holding on. Sometimes, love was the unbearable choice of stepping away. And that choice would haunt him as much as her betrayal haunted Daniel. The house loomed before her like a stranger. Its familiar walls, once a symbol of love and safety, now felt suffocating, cold, hostile, haunted by echoes of rage. Elena stood at the threshold, her suitcase by her side, her hand trembling as she fitted the key into the lock. The door creaked open. Silence. Daniel wasn't home. She stepped inside cautiously, her eyes darting across the room. The air felt heavy, as though it remembered the confrontation. Remembered the night she knelt on the floor and shattered into pieces. Her legs wobbled as she made her way upstairs. In their bedroom, the bed was neatly made, his cologne still faint on the sheets. She sat down for a moment, staring at the photos on the dresser. Her smile pressed against his. Their wedding day frozen in time. Their once perfect love captured in frames that now mocked her. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered, I'm sorry. She wasn't sure if the words were for Daniel, for herself, or for the woman in the photo who had once believed in forever. One by one, she began pulling clothes from the closet, stuffing them into her suitcase. Each item felt like a piece of her past life being folded away, torn from the roots of the home she once cherished. She hesitated over her wedding dress, tucked away at the back. For a long moment, she held the delicate fabric, her fingers trembling as memories of their vows filled her mind. For better or for worse, she pressed the dress against her chest, sobbing. But then, slowly, she laid it back inside and zipped the suitcase shut. This was worse, and it was no longer survivable. As she carried the suitcase downstairs, the sound of the garage door jolted her. Her blood ran cold. Daniel was home. The suitcase thudded against the last step, and in the silence that followed, she heard his footsteps approaching. Elena? His voice called, calm yet sharp. She froze, her heart racing. He appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened, his eyes immediately falling on the suitcase. His face darkened. What are you doing? Her throat tightened. I can't stay here anymore, Daniel. His jaw clenched. You think you can just walk out? After everything? After humiliating me? Her hands trembled around the suitcase handle. You humiliated me too. You broke me, Daniel. I can't live like this anymore. For a moment, he just stared at her, his chest heaving, his fists clenching at his sides. Rage flickered across his face, but beneath it, something else surfaced. Fear, desperation, the terror of losing her for good. Elena, he said, his voice dropping, softer now, almost pleading. Don't do this. We can fix it. I can fix it. She shook her head, tears spilling. It's too late. With that, she stepped past him, her suitcase rolling across the floor. He didn't stop her. He didn't move. He just stood there, frozen, as the door closed behind her. Outside, The night was cool and quiet. Elena inhaled sharply, her lungs burning with a mixture of terror and relief. Every step away from that house felt like shedding chains. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in years, she was walking toward herself. The door slammed shut behind her, and with it, the sound of her footsteps faded into the night. Daniel stood motionless in the foyer, staring at the space she had left. For a long time he didn't move, didn't breathe. It was as if the world had stopped spinning, leaving him trapped in a void. Finally, he looked down. The suitcase marks were etched across the wooden floor, a cruel reminder that she was gone, and that she had chosen to leave. He walked into the living room and sat heavily in his armchair. The silence pressed in on him, suffocating. The ticking of the clock on the wall grew unbearably loud. Each second pounded in his ears, mocking him. Tick, tock, tick, tock. He clenched his fists. Once, this house had been filled with Elena's laughter, with the smell of her cooking, with the warmth of her presence. Now it felt cavernous, dead, echoing with absence. Hours passed. Daniel poured himself a glass of whiskey, then another, then another. The burn of the liquid was sharp, but not sharp enough to cut through the ache in his chest. He stared at the photos on the mantel, the two of them smiling, holding hands, wrapped in a happiness that now felt like a lie. He hurled one frame against the wall. The glass shattered, pieces scattering across the floor. The sound echoed, filling the silence for only a brief moment before the house grew quiet again. Daniel pressed his hands to his head, his breath ragged. "How could you leave?" he whispered into the emptiness. "How could you walk away after everything?" The night stretched into morning, but sleep never came. He wandered through the house like a ghost, opening doors, running his fingers along her side of the closet. Standing in the kitchen where her perfume still lingered faintly in the air, he found one of her scarves draped over a chair. He picked it up, clutching it to his chest, inhaling the faint scent of her. For a fleeting moment, it felt like she was still there. But when he opened his eyes, the truth struck him harder than ever. She was gone, and she wasn't coming back. The emptiness gnawed at him, hollowing him out piece by piece. By the second day, Daniel's rage returned. He stormed through the rooms, ripping open drawers, slamming doors, searching for something, anything that would explain why. He found a small notebook tucked beneath her nightstand. Inside, her handwriting spilled across the pages. Thoughts, confessions, fragments of a woman he no longer knew. "I feel invisible in this house. I miss the way he used to look at me. Adrian makes me feel alive again." Daniel's hands shook as he read, his vision blurring with tears. He tore the pages out, crumpling them, scattering them across the floor like broken pieces of his pride. The house seemed to watch him, walls closing in, suffocating. Without her, it wasn't a home. It was a prison. And Daniel was its only inmate. The days bled into one another. Daniel barely ate, barely slept. The whiskey bottles gathered on the counter, their empty husks lining up like silent witnesses to his decline. His once orderly home, immaculate, precise, had fallen into chaos. Papers scattered across the floor, broken glass still littered the corners, and the air smelled of bitterness and stale alcohol. But what haunted him most was not the silence of the house. It was the silence of her. Elena had vanished. No calls, no messages, no word. She had cut him off completely, as though he had ceased to exist. And the more she ignored him, the more he burned with rage. One night, unable to endure the emptiness any longer, Daniel sat at his desk, staring at her social media profile. Her face smiled back at him from photos, smiles he no longer recognized. He scrolled endlessly, searching for clues, for signs, for him. And then he found it. A picture of Elena posted by someone else. She was sitting at a cafe, sunlight streaming over her face, and across from her, though not fully in frame, was Adrian. Daniel's blood boiled. His fists pounded the desk, rattling the lamp. So it's him. It's really him. The next day, Daniel drove past Adrian's apartment. He told himself it was just to see, just to know. But once he parked across the street, he couldn't tear his eyes away. Hours passed as he sat in the car, watching the building, waiting for a glimpse. When Elena finally emerged, her hair tied back, her steps lighter than they had been in years. Daniel gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles ached. She looked happy. Happy without him. Happy with another man. His vision blurred with rage. "You're mine, Elena," he whispered to the empty car. "You swore yourself to me. You don't get to just erase me." The obsession grew. Every night, Daniel drove past Adrian's place, his eyes scanning the windows for signs of her. He memorized the rhythm of her comings and goings, the restaurants she favored, the parks she walked through. He lived in the shadows of her life, unable to step away, unable to let go to work. He stopped showing up. Friends' calls went unanswered. Nothing mattered anymore but her. His mind replayed their past over and over, twisting memories into torment. The nights they had once spent curled together on the couch now felt like lies, tainted by her laughter with Adrian. Every anniversary, every kiss, every promise. It was all stained, and with each memory, his fury deepened. One night, as he sat alone in the dark, Daniel spoke aloud to the empty room, his voice trembling with madness. "She thinks she can just leave me. She thinks he can have her. But she belongs to me. She always will. If I can't have her, no one can." The words echoed off the walls, chilling in their finality. Because Daniel was no longer just a broken husband, he was a man consumed by betrayal, by rage, by the unbearable thought of losing the woman he believed was his. Daniel's world had shrunk to a single point: Elena with Adrian. Every thought, every breath, every sleepless night circled back to them. His once meticulous life, his job, his friendships, his carefully controlled routine, had crumbled into dust. All that remained was fury. The rage simmered constantly, boiling just beneath the surface, until finally, it erupted. It happened late one night. He had returned from another long, bitter stakeout in his car. Watching the warm glow of Adrian's apartment window, he imagined them inside, laughing, touching, sharing the intimacy that used to be his. The thought festered, clawing at him until he couldn't breathe. By the time he stumbled back into his empty home, something inside him snapped. He stormed through the living room, sweeping everything off the shelves. Books, framed photos, vases shattering against the floor. He tore their wedding portrait from the wall and smashed it against the table, shards of glass slicing into his palm. Blood dripped onto the carpet, but he didn't care. He pressed his bleeding hand against the wall, smearing red across the beige paint. "You did this to me!" he shouted into the empty house, his voice cracking. "You ruined everything." The destruction gave no relief. His chest still heaved, his veins still burned. He staggered into the kitchen, grabbing a bottle of whiskey, downing it in angry gulps. The liquid seared his throat, but the fire inside only grew hotter. He caught his reflection in the darkened window. Wild eyes, unshaven face, a man he barely recognized. He slammed his fist into the glass. It cracked but didn't break, splintering into fractured lines that mirrored his own mind. For a long moment, he just stared at the broken reflection. Then, with a hoarse whisper, he said to himself, "I'll make them pay." The next day, his rage followed him into the world. At the grocery store, when a stranger accidentally bumped into him, Daniel exploded, shoving the man and snarling until others pulled them apart. His temper, once carefully caged, was spilling into every corner of his life. That night, he drove again to Adrian's street. He parked closer this time, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. He watched the light in the window, saw shadows moving inside, imagined what they were doing. The urge to get out, to march up the stairs, to pound on the door until Adrian opened. It nearly overwhelmed him. His hand even touched the door handle. But something, fear, restraint, or perhaps the last fragile piece of sanity, held him back. Instead, he sat there, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, whispering promises into the darkness. "This won't last. She won't stay with you. She's mine. And I'll make sure you never forget it." By the time he returned home, his house looked like a war zone. Broken frames, torn curtains, shattered glass. He sank to the floor amid the wreckage, cradling his head in his hands. The rage had consumed him. The pain had hollowed him out, and Daniel knew, with terrifying clarity, that he was no longer in control. The breaking point had come, and what lay beyond it could only be destruction. The office was quiet, humming with the low rhythm of keyboards and muted phone calls. Daniel hadn't been there in weeks, and when he finally walked in, heads turned. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his beard uneven. He looked like a man hollowed out, but there was a fire burning in him that no one dared approach. His manager stepped into the hall, voice low but firm. "Daniel, we need to talk. You've been gone. You're not answering calls. What's going on?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "What's going on? Everything's gone on. My wife's gone. She left me for someone else. And you expect me to sit here pushing papers like nothing happened." His voice rose. Phones stopped ringing. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every eye in the office turned toward him. His manager reached out, trying to calm him. "Daniel, maybe you should take more time off." "Time off?" Daniel barked, his laughter sharp and broken. "Time off from what?" "From being humiliated. From watching my wife throw herself into another man's arms." The silence was suffocating. Colleagues stared, wide-eyed, as Daniel's face twisted with anguish and rage. He slammed his fist onto a desk, papers scattering like frightened birds. "She was mine," he roared. "Do you hear me? Mine." Security was called. By the time they escorted him out, Daniel was still shouting, his words echoing through the office like the cries of a wounded animal. That night, Elena heard about the outburst from a mutual friend. Her stomach dropped as she listened, trembling. "He's not well, Elena," the friend said. "He's scaring people. You should be careful." Elena hung up, her hands shaking. She pressed her back against Adrian's couch, sliding down until she sat on the floor. Guilt twisted with fear inside her chest. This wasn't the man she had married. This was someone else, someone unrecognizable. And yet, in some ways, she knew she had pushed him to this edge. Adrian crouched beside her, his hand brushing hers. "This isn't your fault. He made his choices." But the words felt thin. Elena's heart was heavy with dread, because deep down, she knew Daniel wasn't done. Days later, her fears came true. She and Adrian were walking through a quiet street market on a Sunday afternoon when it happened. The crowd was lively, children laughing, vendors calling out deals, the smell of roasted chestnuts filling the air. For a brief moment, Elena almost felt normal again, until she heard the voice. "Elena!" Her heart dropped. She turned, and there he was, Daniel, his shirt half untucked, his hair disheveled, his eyes wild. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the stares, his gaze locked on her. "Elena!" he shouted again, his voice cracking. "You can't just walk away from me." Adrian stepped in front of her, his voice steady but firm. "Daniel, stop. This isn't the place." Daniel's face contorted, fury blazing. "Not the place? Not the place. You stole her from me. You took everything." People were staring now. Phones were raised, recording. Vendors froze mid-sale. The entire street had become a stage for Daniel's unraveling. He reached for Elena's arm, but Adrian shoved him back. "Don't touch her." Daniel stumbled, then roared like a wounded beast. "She's my wife." His voice cracked into a sob, his knees buckling as he fell to the pavement. In front of everyone, he broke, screaming, crying, clawing at the ground as though the earth itself had betrayed him. The crowd murmured. Some pitied him, others recoiled. But Elena stood frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks. This was no longer the man she had loved. This was a man drowning in madness, destroying himself in front of the world. That night, videos of the scene spread across social media. Comments poured in, strangers dissecting their private tragedy. Some mocked him, some sympathized, some vilified Elena. But for Daniel, none of it mattered. The only thing he saw when he closed his eyes was Elena walking away from him again. This time in front of the whole world, and the humiliation cut deeper than any wound he had ever known. Elena hadn't slept in 2 nights. The scene at the market still replayed in her head like a nightmare. Daniel's screams, his collapse, the crowd whispering, the cameras capturing every second. The shame, the fear, the pity in strangers' eyes. It was unbearable. Adrian had begged her to stay indoors, to avoid him, to let time create distance. But Elena knew Daniel. Time would not heal him. Time would only make him more desperate. And she was right. It happened on a rainy Thursday evening. Elena was leaving the small bookstore near Adrian's apartment when she felt it. A shadow following her, a familiar presence. Her heart pounded as she quickened her steps, clutching her umbrella. Elena! She froze. His voice was low, trembling, dangerous. She turned slowly. Daniel stood under the awning, soaked from the rain, his eyes bloodshot, his body trembling. He looked half-broken, half-feral. "Daniel," she whispered, her throat tightening. He stepped closer, his voice cracking. "You need to come home." Her grip tightened on the umbrella handle. "No, that home doesn't exist anymore." His face twisted, torn between rage and desperation. "It can exist. We can fix this, Elena. But you have to choose me. Right now. Tonight. Or—" He stopped, his breath heavy, his fists trembling at his sides. "Or what?" she asked, fear lacing her words. His eyes locked on hers, burning. "Or I'll make sure you regret walking away. If you stay with him, if you think you can replace me, then I'll destroy everything, him, you, everything you've built together. Do you understand me?" The words hit her like a physical blow. Her stomach dropped, her hands trembling as the rain pattered around them. "Daniel, listen to yourself. This isn't love. This is control. This is madness." "No!" he shouted, slamming his fist against the wall beside him. The sound made her flinch. His voice broke into sobs. "It's love. I gave you my life, my soul, everything. And you threw it away like it meant nothing. Don't tell me I don't love you. Don't you dare." A small crowd had begun to gather at a distance, sensing the tension. But Daniel didn't care. His world had narrowed to her face, her trembling lips, her eyes filled with fear instead of affection. "Elena!" His voice softened suddenly, almost pleading. "Come back to me. Choose me. Please." Her tears mingled with the rain. "Daniel, I can't. I don't love you like I used to. And you need help, help I can't give you." The words shattered him. His chest heaved, his hands shaking uncontrollably. For a moment, he looked like he might collapse again. But then, his eyes hardened into something colder, darker. "If I can't have you," he whispered, his voice like ice, "no one will." Elena's blood ran cold. She stumbled back, nearly dropping her umbrella. Adrian appeared suddenly at the corner, rushing toward her. Daniel's eyes flicked between them, his jaw clenching, his body vibrating with fury. For a moment, Elena thought he would attack. But instead, Daniel turned sharply, disappearing into the rain-soaked streets before Adrian could reach him. Elena fell into Adrian's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "He's not going to stop," she choked. "He'll never let me go." Adrian held her tight, his own face grim. "Then we'll have to find a way to stop him. Before he does something neither of us can take back." The rain fell in sheets, blurring the neon glow of the bookstore sign behind Elena. She tightened her coat around her, gripping her umbrella like a shield. Her heart raced the moment she heard his voice. "Elena!" She froze. She turned, and there he was, Daniel. His hair clung to his forehead, his shirt plastered to his skin, as if he had been standing in the storm for hours. His eyes, those eyes, were no longer the warm, steady gaze she once knew. They were wild, red-rimmed, hungry. "Daniel!" Her voice trembled. "Why are you here?" He stepped forward, water splashing beneath his shoes. "Why am I here?" "Because you're here. Because you're supposed to be with me. Not him." She took a step back. "Don't do this. Please." His face twisted, torn between anguish and fury. "Do you think you can just erase me? Replace me like I was nothing?" His voice cracked, rising into the rain-soaked air. "I built a life for you, for us. And you—" He jabbed a finger toward her chest, shaking. "You destroyed it." Her breath caught. "No, Daniel. We destroyed it. Both of us. I made mistakes, but so did you. You shut me out, you let us wither." He let out a bitter laugh, his teeth clenched. "And so you crawled into his arms? Adrian, the man who was waiting like a vulture for me to falter." Her voice broke. "He didn't take me from you. You lost me long before Adrian came back." The words hit him like a slap. His jaw clenched, his body trembling. "No!" he whispered, his voice chilling. You don't get to decide when I lose you. I haven't lost you unless I say I have. The rain pounded harder, drowning the space between them. But his voice cut through like a blade. I'm giving you a choice, he said, his tone shifting, calmer, more dangerous. Come home with me. Tonight. Right now. We'll rebuild. We'll erase him from this mess. But if you don't, his eyes darkened. If you don't, I swear, Elena, I'll destroy everything. Him. You. Everything. Her chest tightened, tears streaming down her cheeks, mingling with the rain. Daniel, listen to yourself. That isn't love, it's control. It's possession. It's love, he roared, slamming his fist against the brick wall beside her. The sound made her flinch. His knuckles split open, blood mixing with rainwater. His voice broke into sobs. It's love because I can't breathe without you, because my life means nothing if you're not in it. For a moment, silence. Only the storm spoke. Then his voice softened, trembling with desperation. Please, Elena, don't make me beg. Come back to me. I'll change. I'll be everything you need. Just don't walk away again. Her hands trembled. Her throat felt like it was closing. She wanted to believe him, wanted to cling to the man she had married, the man she had once loved with her whole soul. But when she looked into his eyes now, all she saw was a stranger. Daniel, she whispered, her voice breaking. I can't. Not anymore. You need help, help I can't give you. The words shattered what little composure he had left. His face contorted, his sobs giving way to a terrifying stillness. His voice dropped to a low, icy whisper. If I can't have you, he said, staring straight into her soul, then no one will. Elena's legs nearly buckled. She stumbled back, gripping her umbrella like a weapon. Daniel? Her voice shook. Don't do this. Don't become this man. Please. At that moment, Adrian's voice cut through the storm. Elena! He was running toward them, his eyes sharp, his steps quick. Daniel's gaze flicked between them, rage igniting again at the sight of Adrian. His fists clenched, his body coiled as though he might lunge. Elena's heart seized. But then, in a sudden shift, Daniel straightened, his face hardening into cold resolve. Without a word, he turned and stalked away into the rain, disappearing into the shadows before Adrian reached them. Elena, are you okay? Adrian asked, grabbing her trembling hands. She collapsed against him, sobbing uncontrollably. He's not going to stop. He won't ever let me go. Adrian's jaw tightened, his arms wrapping protectively around her. Then we'll have to stop him first, before he takes this any further. Elena's tears burned as they fell. Deep down, she knew Adrian was right. Daniel's ultimatum wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. The night was unnervingly still. No wind, no voices, no sound but the distant hum of city lights. Elena sat by the window of Adrian's apartment, her hands wrapped around a cup of untouched tea. The steam had long faded, but she hadn't moved. Her eyes scanned the shadows outside, her body tense with the familiar paranoia that had taken root in her chest. Every shifting silhouette, every passing car. It all felt like him, Daniel. Even when he wasn't there, he was everywhere. Adrian stepped quietly into the room, his gaze falling on her. He hated the way her shoulders hunched, the way her once bright eyes flickered with constant fear. This wasn't the Elena he had fallen in love with. It was a woman living in the shadow of another man's obsession. He hasn't been here in a week, Adrian said softly, trying to reassure her. Maybe he's finally letting go. Elena shook her head, her voice brittle. No, that's not who Daniel is. When he goes quiet, that's when he's the most dangerous. Her words hung heavy in the air. Across town, Daniel sat in his car, the dashboard lights casting his face in a ghostly glow. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw clenched, his fingers drumming against the steering wheel in a restless rhythm. He had been watching, always watching, from alleys, from across the street, from behind the safety of shadows. He knew her routines. He knew the way she clung to Adrian, the way she looked over her shoulder like prey sensing the predator nearby. A bitter smile tugged at his lips. Good. Let her be afraid. Let her remember she belongs to me. But beneath the fury, something else lingered. A gnawing emptiness. A question he couldn't escape. If I destroy her, what will I have left? Back at Adrian's apartment, Elena suddenly jolted. The porch light outside flickered. Once, twice, then went dark. Her heart leapt into her throat. Adrian noticed her trembling hands. What is it? The light, she whispered. He's here. I know he's here. Adrian grabbed his phone, his voice low but firm. Then this ends tonight. I'm calling the police. But before he could dial, a sharp knock rattled the door. 3 loud, deliberate bangs that echoed through the apartment. Elena's blood froze. She didn't need to ask who it was. She already knew. Daniel stood on the other side of the door, rain dripping from his coat, his shadow stretching across the hallway like something out of a nightmare. This wasn't a man begging anymore. This was a man standing at the edge of no return. Elena tried to convince herself that the encounter in the rain was the last time, that Daniel's threats had been nothing more than drunken rage, that once he had cooled down, he would retreat into silence. But deep down, she knew better. And she was right. The first time, she noticed it while walking home from the market. A dark car idling at the corner, its engine humming low. She felt its headlights follow her as she crossed the street. When she glanced over her shoulder, the driver turned away. The second time, it was at the library. She caught a glimpse of him between the shelves. A flash of his profile, the curve of his jaw, the set of his shoulders. When she turned sharply, he was gone. The third time, she woke in the night to the sensation of being watched. Peering through Adrian's apartment window, she swore she saw a figure standing across the street, unmoving, staring up at her window. By the time Adrian rushed to look, the street was empty. She grew paranoid. Every creak of the floorboards made her flinch. Every passing stranger seemed like a threat. Her world shrank into fear. Adrian tried to protect her. He changed the locks, installed cameras, and walked her to work. But no matter what he did, Elena couldn't shake the sensation that Daniel was always there. Maybe it's in your head, Adrian said gently one night, brushing her trembling hands with his. Her eyes widened, her voice brittle. That's exactly what he wants me to think. He wants me to feel like I'm losing my mind. He wants me scared. And she was terrified. Meanwhile, Daniel's descent continued. He kept a journal, scribbling in the margins late into the night, words that twisted between love letters and threats. She still loves me. She has to. I see the way she looks over her shoulder. She feels me. If I wait long enough, she'll break. She always belonged to me. The more he wrote, the more convinced he became that fate was on his side, that it was only a matter of time before she came crawling back. But as the days passed, watching her cling tighter to Adrian, his patience wore thinner, his thoughts darkened, his entries shifted. He's poisoning her. She can't see straight with him around. If he's gone, she'll have no choice but to return to me. One evening, Adrian left for a late shift at work, leaving Elena alone. She curled up on the couch, trying to distract herself with a book, when a faint tapping sound echoed from the window. Her heart lurched. She turned slowly. There, in the glass, a shadow loomed. For a fleeting second, she met Daniel's eyes through the rain-speckled pane. His face was pale, haunting, pressed close enough for her to see the desperation etched into every line. She gasped, stumbling back, clutching her chest. When she blinked, he was gone. But the terror remained. That night, Elena wept into Adrian's arms when he returned. He's going to hurt us, she whispered. I know it. He's not just watching anymore, he's waiting. Adrian's face hardened. Then it's time we stop waiting too. It's time we go to the police. But in her heart, Elena feared it was already too late. Because Daniel wasn't just a shadow anymore, he was a storm, gathering force, waiting to strike. The police station smelled faintly of coffee and rain-soaked uniforms. Elena sat at the metal desk, her hands clasped tightly together, her knuckles pale. Adrian sat beside her, his arm draped protectively across the back of her chair. The officer across from them was kind but tired, the weight of too many cases etched into the lines around his eyes. He adjusted his notepad and spoke gently. Start from the beginning. What exactly has been happening? Elena swallowed hard, her voice trembling. He's following me, watching me, Sometimes at the library, sometimes outside our apartment. A few nights ago, he was standing right at the window. The officer's brows rose slightly, but he didn't interrupt. She continued, her tears threatening to spill. He threatened me too. He told me if I didn't go back to him, he'd destroy everything. He said if he couldn't have me, no one would. The words hung in the air like a curse. Adrian leaned forward, his tone sharp. She's terrified. We need a restraining order, something to keep him away from her. This isn't just an ex-husband being bitter, he's dangerous. The officer scribbled notes, nodding slowly. I understand your concern, but do you have evidence? Photos, recordings, messages? Elena's shoulders slumped. No. Every time I see him, he disappears before I can do anything. The officer sighed. That makes it harder. Without evidence, it becomes your word against his. We can file a report, and you can apply for a restraining order, but enforcement can be tricky unless he violates it in a clear way. Elena's chest tightened. The walls felt like they were closing in. So you're saying there's nothing you can do? Not until he hurts me. The officer's silence was answer enough. Later that evening, back at Adrian's apartment, Elena collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. They don't believe me. They'll never believe me until it's too late. Adrian knelt in front of her, taking her hands gently in his. Then we'll get our own evidence. Cameras, logs, anything we need. We'll prove what he's doing. And if the police won't stop him, I will. His words were fierce, but Elena heard the fear hidden beneath them. Because no matter how much Adrian wanted to protect her, she knew Daniel was always one step ahead. Slipping through cracks, twisting reality until she felt like she was the crazy one. Across town, Daniel sat calmly in a cafe, dressed neatly in a pressed shirt, his demeanor collected. He was speaking to another officer he called himself, spinning a different story. She's confused, he said smoothly, his smile disarming. My wife's been under a lot of stress. She's living with another man now, and I think he's influencing her, poisoning her against me. She's saying things that aren't true. The officer nodded, jotting down notes. Daniel leaned back, confident. I'd never hurt her. All I want is for her to get help, to remember the life we built together. She's not well, but I'll wait. I'll always wait for her. On the surface, he looked like the grieving, patient husband. But beneath the mask, the storm was brewing darker than ever. The night was heavy with silence, the kind that presses on the chest and makes every breath feel stolen. Elena sat on the edge of Adrian's bed, her body trembling. In her hands was the note she had found taped to the apartment door. You'll never be safe without me. I'll be waiting. Her tears blurred the ink, but the message was clear. Daniel wasn't done. Not until she was his again or destroyed. Adrian loaded the security footage on his laptop, his jaw clenched. The cameras he'd installed finally caught Daniel, standing in the alley, watching. Hours of him just standing there, waiting. This is it, Adrian said firmly. This is the evidence the police need. They can't ignore this. But Elena shook her head, clutching the note to her chest. Don't you see? Even if they take him away, he'll find me again. He'll never stop. Not until... Her voice broke. Not until one of us is gone. The knock came just after midnight. 3 slow, deliberate bangs. Elena froze, her blood turning cold. Adrian grabbed a baseball bat from under the bed, motioning for her to stay behind him. He crept toward the door, his heart pounding like a drum. Elena! Daniel's voice echoed through the wood, calm, almost tender. Open the door. Let's talk. One last time. Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. She shook her head violently, whispering, No, no. Please make him leave. Adrian's grip tightened on the bat. Go away, Daniel. She doesn't want you here. A pause. Then a laugh, low and bitter. You think you've won? You think she belongs to you? His voice grew sharper, darker. She'll never love you the way she loved me. Adrian's rage boiled over. He yanked the door open. Daniel stood there, drenched in rain, his eyes wild yet oddly calm, like a man who had already accepted his fate. The two men locked eyes. Love twisted into hatred, protection fueled by desperation. Daniel stepped forward. Adrian raised the bat, his muscles taut. For a moment, It seemed violence would decide everything. But then Elena's voice cut through the storm. "Stop!" she screamed, rushing between them. Her eyes blazed with a strength neither man had seen before. "This ends tonight." She turned to Daniel, her voice trembling but unyielding. "You don't love me. Not anymore. You love control. You love winning. But I am not your prize. I am not yours to keep." Daniel's lips trembled. "Elena, don't say that. Don't." Her tears fell freely. "Goodbye, Daniel." For a moment, his face crumbled, the mask slipping to reveal the broken man beneath. His knees buckled, his hands shaking. But just as quickly, his expression hardened, rage flickering back in his eyes. Before he could step closer, flashing lights filled the street. Sirens wailed. 2 officers rushed up the stairs. Adrian had called them earlier, anticipating this moment. Daniel thrashed as they pulled him back, his screams echoing through the night. "She's mine. She'll always be mine." Elena covered her ears, sobbing, until the sound finally faded into the distance. Silence returned. A different silence this time. Not the suffocating stillness of fear, but the fragile calm of release. Elena collapsed into Adrian's arms, her body shaking. He held her tight, whispering, "It's over. You're safe now." But Elena knew the scars Daniel had left would not fade easily. She had loved him once. She had given him her soul, and in return he had tried to cage her. Now, for the first time in years, she was free, and freedom had never felt so heavy. Rose the end rose.